2 plates. Same food. Same amounts. Same person. Dinner at 6 p.m. A careful meal. Grilled fish, steamed vegetables, half a cup of brown rice. By 8 p.m., the blood sugar reads 122. Good. Everything working. 6 a.m. the next morning. Nothing eaten since dinner. 10 hours of sleep. First test of the day. 158. Nobody told you why. Your doctor said keep watching your diet. Your nutritionist said limit carbohydrates further. And you went home and stared at that morning number, wondering what you did wrong the night before. When you did nothing wrong. When the problem wasn't the meal you ate. It was what your liver did while you slept. Your liver produces glucose overnight, deliberately, every night, without your permission. It's called hepatic glucose production. Your liver manufacturing new sugar from stored glycogen and amino acids, releasing it into your bloodstream between 2 and 4 in the morning in preparation for waking. In people under 60 with healthy insulin response, the pancreas manages this output quietly. After 60, with insulin resistance present, the brakes on that process stop working. And the morning number spikes, regardless of what you ate the night before. Cinnamon doesn't reach that mechanism. ACV doesn't hold through the night. Most of the natural blood sugar remedies seniors use work on meals, on glucose as it enters the bloodstream, not on the liver's overnight production line. And today, I'm going to show you the one seed, confirmed across 23 randomized controlled trials, that specifically targets the hepatic glucose production pathway. The overnight mechanism. The one that's been raising your fasting number every single morning while you slept. And I'm going to explain why your doctor has almost certainly never mentioned it. Before we go further, drop your morning fasting glucose number in the comments. The first reading of the day, before eating anything. And if you're on metformin, add yes. I read every comment on this channel. By the end of this video, you will understand your morning blood sugar number in a way your doctor has never explained it. And you will have a specific, research-backed protocol you can start tonight, before you go to sleep, that begins working during the hours your body produces the most glucose. Not tomorrow morning, tonight. Beverly is 69, retired elementary school principal, Birmingham, Alabama. 41 years shaping children's lives. The kind of person who believes that discipline, consistency, and doing the right things every day produces results. That was her teaching philosophy. And when she was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 18 months ago, she applied the same philosophy. She cut out white bread immediately, switched to a Mediterranean diet, added a 30-minute walk every afternoon, started Ceylon cinnamon in warm water every morning before breakfast, bought a glucometer and checked her numbers twice daily. She was doing everything correctly. Everything the nutrition website said. Everything her primary care doctor suggested. Her postprandial glucose, the number 2 hours after meals, responded. 140, 135, sometimes 128. Moving in the right direction. Beverly felt like the system was working. But every single morning, before breakfast, before anything, the fasting number sat at 145 to 160. Day after day after day, for 11 months. Her doctor increased her metformin dose at month 9. The postprandial numbers improved further. The morning number barely changed. Beverly told me she had started dreading the moment she woke up, not because of how she felt fine, but because she knew exactly what that glucometer was going to show her. And she couldn't explain it, and neither could her doctor. "Keep working on the diet," he said. Give the metformin more time. The morning number wasn't a diet problem. It wasn't a compliance problem. It was a liver problem. A specific mechanism that Beverly's entire protocol, cinnamon, diet, walking, metformin, was never designed to fully address. Let me explain exactly what is happening inside your body between midnight and 6 a.m. Because this is the mechanism nobody walks you through. And once you understand it, your morning numbers will make complete sense. Your body runs on biological rhythms. Your circadian clock, the internal schedule that governs sleep, hormone production, temperature, and metabolism, begins preparing you for waking approximately 2 to 3 hours before you actually open your eyes. Part of that preparation involves a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol begins rising around 2 to 4 a.m., reaching its peak near the moment of waking. Cortisol's job in this context is essentially to mobilize energy, to make sure fuel is available when you need to get up and function. One of the primary ways it does this, cortisol signals your liver to release stored glucose into the bloodstream. This is hepatic glucose production. Your liver contains stored sugar, glycogen, and it also has the machinery to manufacture glucose from amino acids and fat through a process called gluconeogenesis. Gluconeogenesis. Glucose production from non-sugar sources. Your liver literally makes sugar out of raw materials and releases it. This is supposed to happen. In a metabolically healthy person, the resulting glucose rise is small, managed by an insulin response, and cleared before the first glucose reading of the day. In a person with insulin resistance, particularly after 60 when the insulin response has slowed, here is what happens instead. The cortisol signal fires at 3 a.m. Your liver releases glucose. Your insulin response, which has been weakened by years of receptor downregulation, cannot clear that glucose fast enough. The glucose accumulates in your bloodstream for hours. By 6 a.m., when you wake and test, that accumulated glucose is what you're reading. Not the consequence of your dinner. Not a failure of your daytime diet. The consequence of your liver's 3 a.m. production run. And your insulin system's inability to keep pace with it. This phenomenon has a name, the dawn phenomenon. First described in detail by researchers in the 1980s and now thoroughly documented in the diabetes literature. It is estimated to affect 30 to 50% of people with type 2 diabetes, meaning roughly 1 in 2 diabetics has a morning fasting number driven partly or primarily by overnight hepatic glucose production rather than dietary factors. Think about what that means. Half of everyone managing type 2 diabetes is treating the wrong problem when they focus exclusively on daytime diet. Half is fighting the meal they ate when the real battle is happening 3 hours before breakfast. In the dark, while they sleep. Beverly wasn't failing. Her protocol was excellent for daytime blood sugar. She just had no tool for the 4 hours her liver spent manufacturing glucose in the small hours of the morning. Until she found one. Before I introduce what works, let me explain specifically why what most people are already using doesn't address this mechanism. Not to discourage you, to help you understand why you're adding one more tool, not replacing the ones you have. Cinnamon's primary mechanism, MHCP activating insulin receptor kinase, improves peripheral insulin sensitivity. That's muscle and fat tissue. It has a modest effect on hepatic insulin sensitivity, liver cells, but the evidence for cinnamon specifically addressing hepatic glucose production is limited. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition in 2011 specifically examined cinnamon's effect on fasting glucose and found inconsistent results, precisely because fasting glucose is primarily driven by the hepatic mechanism cinnamon doesn't strongly target. Apple cider vinegar, which many of you are using, and I see your comments about it regularly, works through acetic acid's inhibition of disaccharidase enzymes. It slows the breakdown of complex carbohydrates into glucose. This is a meal-based mechanism. It works on food as it moves through your digestive system. Taken before bed, as some people do, its effective window is approximately 3 to 4 hours. Your liver's glucose production begins around 2 a.m. If you took ACV at 10 p.m., most of its activity has diminished before the production peak begins. Not zero effect, but not targeted. Before I get to the seed itself, the Midnight Insulin Trap is the guide I put together specifically about what happens in this window, the 4 hours between 2 and 6 a.m., and the specific protocol for addressing both the cortisol trigger and the liver production. It complements exactly what I'm covering today. Link is in the description if that interests you. What you need for the overnight hepatic mechanism is something with a different biochemical target, something that reaches the liver's glucose manufacturing pathway, something that suppresses gluconeogenesis, the production of new glucose, specifically during the overnight window, and something with enough half-life to still be active at 3 a.m. if taken before sleep. That is a specific set of requirements, and there is one natural compound that meets all three with 23 clinical trials behind it. Nigella sativa. Black seed. Also called black cumin, though it is not related to the cumin in your spice rack. Small, black, slightly angular seeds with a surface like rough leather. They smell like thyme and pepper and something almost medicinal. The smell is the chemistry. That aroma comes from a volatile compound called thymoquinone, and thymoquinone is the active molecule that has been studied in over 1,000 peer-reviewed papers since the 1980s. A meta-analysis published in 2017 in Complementary Therapies in Medicine, lead researchers Dr. Roshanak Daryabegi-Kotbasara and colleagues pooled the results of 23 randomized controlled trials on Nigella sativa and blood glucose. 23 trials. Not 3, not 10, 23. The conclusion? Nigella sativa significantly improved fasting blood glucose, HbA1c, and insulin resistance across multiple populations, with a safety profile described as favorable. Black seed has been used medicinally for over 3,000 years. Seeds were found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is quoted in multiple hadith describing it as a cure for everything except death. Ancient Egyptian physicians used it for digestive disorders, inflammation, and what historical records describe as sweet urine, the ancient recognition of diabetes. And the prophet Isaiah, in chapter 28 of the Bible, specifically references the wisdom of cultivating and using black cumin, which most biblical botanists now identify as Nigella. 3 millennia of consistent use across 3 major civilizations. And 23 clinical trials to tell us why. Thymoquinone, the primary active compound in black seed, works on blood sugar through 4 distinct and simultaneous mechanisms. I want to walk through each one, because understanding what's happening is what makes the protocol make sense. Mechanism 1. Hepatic glucose suppression. This is the overnight mechanism, the one Beverly needed. Thymoquinone inhibits specific enzymes in the gluconeogenesis pathway, particularly glucose 6-phosphatase and phosphoenol pyruvate carboxykinase. These are the 2 rate-limiting enzymes in hepatic glucose production. Block these enzymes, and your liver's ability to manufacture new glucose overnight is significantly reduced. The production line slows. The glucose that would have accumulated in your bloodstream at 3 a.m. is not produced. And your 6 a.m. reading reflects a liver that was working more quietly. This is the same enzyme target as metformin. Glucose 6-phosphatase inhibition. This is why researchers have drawn comparisons between thymoquinone and metformin at the hepatic level. Metformin suppresses hepatic glucose production through the AMPK pathway. Thymoquinone suppresses it through direct enzyme inhibition. Different pathway. Same destination. The liver's 3-AM glucose factory runs at reduced capacity. Mechanism 2. Peripheral insulin sensitivity. Thymoquinone improves how responsive muscle and fat cells are to insulin signaling. The lock and key analogy. Thymoquinone helps the lock function better. It does this through AMPK activation, the same master metabolic switch we discussed in the berberine context. AMPK activation improves GLUT4 translocation, moving glucose transport proteins to the cell surface, which pulls glucose into muscle tissue independently of insulin. This addresses the daytime postprandial mechanism, while thymoquinone's enzyme inhibition addresses the overnight hepatic mechanism, both happening simultaneously. Mechanism 3. Beta cell protection. This one is the mechanism I find most remarkable, and it's the one most blood sugar content never discusses. Your beta cells, the cells in your pancreas that produce insulin, are under oxidative stress every single day you have elevated blood sugar. High glucose generates reactive oxygen species, free radicals, that attack beta cell DNA, proteins, and membranes. Over years and decades, this oxidative damage kills beta cells. And beta cells don't regenerate easily. Once they're gone, your pancreas produces less insulin. Not because of diet, because of oxidative damage to irreplaceable cells. Thymoquinone is one of the most potent natural antioxidants studied in the context of pancreatic tissue. A 2015 study published in the European Journal of Pharmacology specifically examined thymoquinone's protective effect on beta cells under oxidative stress conditions. The result? Thymoquinone significantly reduced oxidative damage markers in pancreatic tissue and preserved beta cell function. Think about what this means in practical terms. Every other remedy you're using manages glucose. Thymoquinone protects the cells that produce the hormone doing the managing. It's not just treatment, it's structural preservation. Mechanism 4. Chronic inflammation reduction. This is the background mechanism, the one that makes everything else work better. Chronic low-grade inflammation is the foundational driver of insulin resistance. When inflammatory cytokines, particularly interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, are chronically elevated, they directly interfere with insulin receptor signaling. Your cells stop listening to insulin's signal. Not because the insulin is wrong, because the inflammatory environment is drowning out the signal. Thymoquinone inhibits NF-kappa B, the master inflammatory transcription factor, and reduces circulating levels of IL-6 and TNF-alpha. A 2019 systematic review in Phytomedicine documented consistent anti-inflammatory effects across multiple Nigella sativa trials. As inflammation decreases, insulin receptor sensitivity improves. Not through any direct receptor mechanism, but by quieting the noise that was preventing the signal from getting through. 4 mechanisms: hepatic glucose suppression, peripheral insulin sensitivity, beta cell protection, chronic inflammation reduction. All 4 operating simultaneously from one compound. This is why the 23-trial meta-analysis found consistent, significant results across multiple populations. The compound is working on the entire system, not just one piece of it. Let me give you the specific numbers, because I know many of you want to see the evidence before deciding anything. The 2017 meta-analysis, Daryabegi, Kotbesara, and colleagues, published in Complementary Therapies in Medicine, pooled 23 randomized controlled trials involving over 1,500 participants. Results on fasting blood glucose. Mean reduction of 27 milligrams per deciliter. Results on HbA1c. Mean reduction of 1.08%. Results on insulin resistance. Statistically significant improvement across trials. The researchers noted that the effects were consistent regardless of dose form, oil, ground seed, or capsule, though the magnitude varied. Let me put that 1.08% HbA1c reduction in context. A reduction of 1% in HbA1c is considered clinically significant. It corresponds to meaningful reduction in diabetes complication risk. The American Diabetes Association's guidelines for pharmacological intervention typically aim for HbA1c reduction in the range of 1 to 2%. Black seed. In the pooled meta-analysis of 23 trials, achieved just over 1%. From a seed. A particularly important study for the overnight mechanism specifically, Bamosa and colleagues published in the Indian Journal of Physiology and Pharmacology in 2010. 94 patients with type 2 diabetes. Randomized to receive one of 3 doses of Nigella sativa daily, 1 gram, 2 grams, or 3 grams, or placebo. Duration, 3 months. The fasting glucose results at 3 months. 1 gram group, down 14%. 2 gram group, the sweet spot, down 20%. 3 gram group, actually slightly less effective than 2 grams, suggesting a dose ceiling. The researchers specifically noted that the improvements in fasting glucose were more pronounced than improvements in postprandial glucose, consistent with the hepatic mechanism being the primary driver. Fasting glucose more responsive than postprandial. Specifically, that is, the overnight hepatic mechanism showing up in the data. This is the compound Beverly needed and didn't know existed. Now, black seed is available in 3 primary forms, and the form matters in ways that are not intuitive. Form 1. Black seed oil. Cold-pressed oil from Nigella sativa seeds. Dark, pungent, with a sharp, almost harsh taste that catches in the back of your throat. The oil concentrates thymoquinone, which is fat-soluble, and generally delivers higher concentrations than ground seed. Multiple studies have used oil as the intervention, and the results are strong. The standard dose used in clinical trials, half a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon daily. Form 2. Ground seed. The whole seeds, ground to a powder in a small grinder, coffee grinder works, right before use. Ground seed delivers thymoquinone alongside the full fiber and nutrient matrix of the seed. The fiber component has its own blood sugar benefits, slowing gastric emptying and feeding gut bacteria that improve insulin sensitivity. Ground seed delivers somewhat lower thymoquinone concentration than oil, but adds the fiber benefit oil doesn't have. The dose: half a teaspoon of whole seeds, freshly ground, daily. Form 3. Whole seeds. Eaten whole, sprinkled on food, added to yogurt, taken with honey. This is the traditional preparation method and still valid. However, whole seeds are significantly less bioavailable than ground seed or oil. Your digestive system struggles to break through the hard outer shell of the unprocessed seed. Studies suggest that grinding or pressing increases thymoquinone bioavailability by up to 300% compared to whole seeds. If you are eating whole seeds and not seeing results, this is likely why. For the overnight hepatic mechanism specifically, I recommend black seed oil. Here's the rationale. Thymoquinone is fat-soluble. Its absorption requires dietary fat. The oil delivers thymoquinone already in its fat-soluble matrix. You don't need to pair it with a fat source. And because we want this compound active during the 2 to 4 a.m. window, we need a form with an adequate half-life. Oil taken with a small fat-containing food at bedtime enters the bloodstream more efficiently and maintains activity through more of the overnight window than ground seed alone. Where to find it? Black seed oil is available at Walmart at Middle Eastern grocery stores in most American cities, at Whole Foods, and online. Look for cold-pressed, unrefined. The oil should be dark, almost black-brown, with a strong, slightly medicinal smell. Light or golden oil has been processed and has significantly lower thymoquinone content. Price range: $12 to $25 for a 4-ounce bottle, a 2 to 4 month supply at therapeutic doses. It is one of the most affordable, clinically validated compounds for blood sugar in any pharmacy or grocery store. Here is the specific bedtime protocol. Timing is everything with this compound, and I want to explain why the timing is what it is before giving you the instructions. The overnight hepatic glucose production peak in people with insulin resistance typically occurs between 2 and 5 a.m. Thymoquinone's half-life in the bloodstream, based on pharmacokinetic studies, is approximately 4 to 6 hours after oral administration. To have thymoquinone active at 2 to 4 a.m., you need it in your system by 10 to 11 p.m. This is the logic behind bedtime administration. You are loading the compound so it peaks during the period when hepatic glucose production peaks. The protocol: 1 teaspoon of cold-pressed black seed oil taken between 9:30 and 10:30 p.m. Taken with, and this is important, a small fat-containing food. 1 teaspoon of natural peanut butter. Half a handful of raw walnuts. A small piece of cheese. Any fat source. The fat slows gastric emptying slightly and ensures thymoquinone is absorbed through the fat-soluble pathway instead of passing through largely unabsorbed. Many people mix the oil with a half teaspoon of raw honey. The traditional preparation across Middle Eastern and South Asian cultures. Honey masks the intensity of the oil's taste, which is genuinely strong and not pleasant to everyone. The honey amount is small enough that it does not create a meaningful glucose event before bed. And the bridge to make here, one I want the metformin users specifically to hear. Metformin's primary mechanism is also hepatic glucose suppression. It reduces overnight liver glucose production through AMPK. Thymoquinone reduces it through enzyme inhibition. They work on the same problem through different pathways. Some researchers have suggested this complementarity may actually be why some patients see better outcomes on lower metformin doses when combining with black seed. Not because the black seed replaces metformin, but because both are addressing the same overnight mechanism from different angles simultaneously. If you take metformin, this is a conversation worth having with your prescribing physician, with this research in hand. The Midnight Insulin Trap Guide, linked in the description, walks through the complete overnight protocol, including the meal timing, the cortisol management piece, and how the bedtime black seed protocol fits into the broader 3-step overnight system. If your morning numbers are what frustrate you most, that guide is specifically for this problem. Now, stop. Before the action plan, 3 combinations that specifically interact with black seed oil's mechanisms and must be understood before you start. Combination 1 to avoid: black seed oil with warfarin or blood-thinning medications. Thymoquinone has antiplatelet properties. It reduces platelet aggregation, the tendency of blood cells to clump together. This is actually one of black seed's documented cardiovascular benefits. But if you take warfarin, Eliquis, Xarelto, Plavix, or even daily aspirin therapy, the combination amplifies the anticoagulant effect. Your INR may shift. Bleeding risk may increase. This is not a reason to avoid black seed oil. It is a reason to tell your doctor and request monitoring if you take blood thinners. Do not start black seed oil if you take blood-thinning medications without this conversation first. Combination 2 to avoid: black seed oil and sulfonylurea medications without glucose monitoring. Sulfonylureas, glipizide, glimepiride, glyburide, force insulin secretion from your pancreas regardless of blood glucose level. Black seeds' AMPK activation and hepatic suppression both lower blood glucose through mechanisms that stack on top of this forced insulin secretion. The result? Blood glucose can drop lower and faster than expected. Hypoglycemia, blood sugar dropping below 70, is a real risk if you start black seed oil at full dose alongside sulfonylureas. Start at half dose, half a teaspoon of oil, and monitor morning glucose for the first 2 weeks. Know what low blood sugar feels like: shaking, sweating, confusion, rapid heartbeat. Have glucose tablets or juice available. Combination 3. Black seed oil in pregnancy or planning pregnancy. Animal studies have shown that thymoquinone at high doses has uterotonic effects. It stimulates uterine contractions. These effects have not been fully characterized in human studies. However, standard guidance from pharmacologists reviewing the research recommends against black seed supplementation during pregnancy. If you are pregnant, planning pregnancy, or nursing, this compound is not appropriate until you've had the conversation with your OB. Culinary amounts. Small quantities as food seasoning are generally not considered in this category. Therapeutic supplementation doses are. Those 3 are the interactions that matter most. For the majority of seniors watching this, who are not on blood thinners, not on sulfonylureas, and not pregnant, black seed oil's safety profile across the clinical trial literature is strong. GI discomfort is the most common side effect in sensitive individuals, and typically resolves with gradual dose introduction. Here is what Beverly saw. And here is what you should realistically expect. Beverly started black seed oil at bedtime, 1 teaspoon with a small amount of natural peanut butter at week 2 of adding it to her existing protocol. She kept the cinnamon. She kept the Mediterranean diet. She kept the afternoon walk. She kept her metformin. She added 1 teaspoon of black seed oil before sleep. Week 1. No significant change in morning fasting numbers. She almost stopped. She told me later that she'd been through enough disappointments with her morning readings that she was skeptical of everything. Week 2. Fasting glucose dropped from an average of 153 to 143. 10 points. She thought it was a fluctuation. Week 3, 138. Week 4, 131. At month 2, 8 weeks from the first dose, Beverly's average morning fasting glucose was 124, down from 153, a 29-point reduction. Approaching the target she'd been working toward for 11 months. From a compound that costs less than $12 a month. Taken before bed, while she slept. At month 3, her endocrinologist in Birmingham ran an A1C, 6.9, down from 7.8, a 0.9% reduction in 3 months. The doctor asked what Beverly had changed. She described the bedtime oil protocol. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, and Beverly quoted this to me specifically, "I've never heard of that. Show me the study." Expected timeline for you. 1 to 2 weeks before the hepatic suppression effect manifests in morning readings. The enzyme inhibition is cumulative. Thymoquinone needs to build adequate tissue levels before the liver production pathway is meaningfully suppressed. Week 2 to 4. Visible movement in fasting numbers. Month 2 to 3. Sustained reduction with A1C changes beginning to appear. To those of you living with type 1 diabetes, the dawn phenomenon affects type 1 patients as well, and the hepatic mechanism I described is relevant regardless of type. Thymoquinone's beta cell protection mechanism is actually particularly relevant for type 1, given the autoimmune destruction of beta cells that drives the condition. However, The interaction with insulin therapy requires specific discussion with your endocrinologist. The hypoglycemia risk of combining a glucose-lowering compound with insulin is real and requires individualized monitoring guidance. Please bring the 2017 meta-analysis to that appointment. Here is where you start. Tonight. Step 1. Tonight. Purchase cold-pressed black seed oil. Walmart carries it in